It seems Blackmyth Wukong was one of those upcoming titles that had been highly anticipated by many for years, up until the launch. So now that the game is here, how is it exactly? Well, for one, the game has gotten a great rating across most reviews and journalist brands, though a lot of what was said about Wukong in the actual breakdown, if you listen to it, are a bit of a mixed bag despite the rating surprisingly. In addition, there have also been some controversy regarding some reviews, especially one from Screen Rant, where the lack of inclusivity was an issue that they found, and even an alleged note given to reviewers about what they can or cannot do upon accepting key for the game. These catalysts, if you want to call them that, have also seemed to serve as a controversy marketing in themselves that allow Wukong to garner even more attention past its initial audience. But regardless, the game seems to have gotten an extremely positive reception upon its launch, so much so that it is currently like the most played single player game of all time on Steam, which is quite insane. Very impressive indeed. But let's ask the question, does the hype amount to anything in the actual game? Well, let's find out. Now, I do want to preface this by saying that these are my initial thoughts playing Wukong, and that they may or may not change upon further progression, so do keep that in mind, although I don't see how certain aspect could change considering they're more of like a core feature, but still, we'll see how things play out. With all the ratings and hype this game has gotten, I find my initial takeaway of Wukong to be not impressed, to put it lightly. It comes off as a boss stimulator, if you want to put it that way, with little to no substance. It's a good game, but there are a lot of good games, but something like Wukong that's been elevated to this height. I would definitely say it might have been overhyped or that it's overrated due to many features of the game I feel are lacking or just not up there. Even one of its main appeal, which is the combat gameplay, which, let's talk about that. The gameplay mechanics in Wukong isn't bad per se. It's good for what it is, but definitely falls short in comparison to other action RPGs in terms of impacts and hit feedbacks. It can come off clunky at times because of this. The interesting thing is, when I look back at the early gameplay footage that was released back in 2020, surprisingly, the game actually looks better, far better I would say, at that stage than it is now, which is mind-boggling. Sound effects, the animations, the impacts, and even the variety of skills, at Wukong Arsenal, it far surpasses the version that was recently released to the public. Because in the current game, right, what I noticed is the animation of your stab weapon seems to be consistent across all forms of context, to where it feels like there is no impact or any indication of a hit lag. For example, in Dragon Dogma, certain weapons and attacks are far slower to convey the sheer weight and power, not to mention, when you hear your opponent, there is a hit lag where essentially your attack's animations slow down to indicate a contact made with your target, because speaking in terms of physics, this would be similar to friction, where a force, which would be your opponent, deaccelerates the motion of your character attack animations, because it takes, quite a bit of effort and time to cut through something. Now, I haven't played God of War, but I've also noticed from the gameplay footage that I've seen that also seem to have implemented this concept where you can see there is a slight hit stop when your character hand or weapon comes in contact with the opponent. In addition to lack of impacts and the combat feeling weightless, the sound design is also not really there. For the most part, the sound of your attack is pretty much the same, regardless of who it is you're hitting. For instance, when you're fighting the Wandering White boss, this guy, he seems to be made of some kind of a stone, ceramic, or even a glass. And so you would think the sound effect, for hitting would be similar to, let's say breaking a set material, whatever that is, whether that be a glass or a stone, but not really. The sound seems to be the same, mostly whether it's him or some random enemy. Even Dragon Dogma Dark Risen, hitting a stone golem has its own unique sound to represent what hitting a stone would be like. You also see the attention to detail reflected further if you attack the crystal, where it sounded like you're breaking a real crystal. Again, how is they go from something that was put out years ago, and I'm referring to their early gameplay footage, which look really good, to now this? I have not a single clue. And speaking of sound, this game has little to no ambience whatsoever, which is strange for a game set in ancient Chinese mythology. There are a lot of instrumental music that are predominantly known to have existed or play in ancient China, and so when you have a game with a setting and mythology such as Sun Wukong. Having no ambient music, it's such an odd choice as well as a missed opportunity. If you don't move your character or even attack at all, the game is literally dead silent. I'm not sure as to why they chose to go this route. The game is gorgeous, the details are on screen full display, but graphics should always come after gameplay and story. And no, it doesn't end there because we gotta talk about these skills tree, if you can even call it that, because a lot of these advancements are more of an upgrade or passive variation of the core skills you've attained. You have your light and heavy attacks, and then the rest are just 3 spells and 1 form. A lot of the customization are just again you optimizing your already existing skills. But there doesn't seem to be new skills pertaining to like staves or anything else, unless, you know, once again, it varies from the staff skills you already have. I could be wrong once we get into the later parts of the game, but from what I can see, you can look at even skills that you haven't unlocked yet. That may be very unlikely. This is unfortunate since I can name a number of ways staff can be used or Sun Wukong has used in medias, such as throwing it and calling the staff back to him, or enlarging it and then slamming onto the ground to create a shockwave strong enough to even repel like any surrounding enemies. Sun Wukong has an insane amount of skills in his arsenal from what I understand, that there's really no reason for the ability tree to be this narrow in scope. Another annoying thing is the camera, which I would argue is pretty bad for a game of this caliber and released in today's age. The speed and the angle in which the camera moves around you, it makes the combat and looking at your surroundings pretty awkward at times. It doesn't feel as smooth as or responsive as you would think a game centered around action combat would be. Another major shortcomings, heck, I argue maybe even worse, more detrimental than the combat itself, is the narrative and the storytelling, which is next to poorly constructed. Clearly, this is based on a very well-known tale, mythology, but again, there really isn't a storytelling or immersion aside from a few dialogues and extremely formulated NPCs interaction as you progress. The boss encounters are extremely predictable and very scripted, it feels. You must know when to expect them, and it doesn't help the story either when all they do is just give a few dialogues before attacking you. Again, all of this just comes off as a boss stimulator with no substance. The game is extremely instant with many invisible walls, and the path you take is very linear, so it seems like the game is meant for a very certain niche category. The scope of Wukong so far is, well, not very scoped. Now, there are people who may be actively purchasing the game and even praising it in retaliation against what some reviews, especially Screen Rant, has said, and even what the alleged note that was given out to people who got the key to Wukong. Well, first of all, what does any of that or what one website have anything to do with the merits of the game itself? Or why should it matter at all in the context of the quality of the product? Seems like people are either basing their take entirely based off a fake outrage to make themselves feel better, or something that has zero relevance, again, to the game itself. But hey, you do you. With that being said, these are some of my main takeaways so far from the initial gameplay. Some of these may or may not change, but only time will tell at this point. Do keep in mind that, but I doubt a lot of it will differ over the course of my playthrough, as again, a lot of these are core mechanics. Overall, Wukong is good for what it is, but that really isn't putting it high up there at all, does it? Just saying that it's good. It's okay, but I would say it's a bit overrated. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think the game is overrated as well or overhyped? As always, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and catch you later.